Okay, some examples of simplifying complex fractions. We start out with a fairly simple one. 1 plus 1/2 over 6. Now that's a complex fraction because there's a fraction within a fraction. And there's two methods actually to simplify these so that you don't have a fraction within a fraction. One is to look at where your fractions are. In this case, I've got a fraction in the numerator. So I'm going to combine the two terms in the numerator by first finding the common denominator. And between 1 and 1/2, the common denominator is 2. So I'm going to rewrite the 1 as 2 over 2. And then that will allow me to go ahead and rewrite the numerator as 3/2. Once I do that, I've just got a fraction divided by another number. And when you do that, you multiply by the reciprocal. So I'll have 3/2 times the reciprocal of the denominator. And I get a little cancellation here. 3 goes into 6 2 times. And end up with 1/4. That's one method. Another method would be to look at all the fractions within the larger fraction, and there's only one in this case, the 1/2, and multiply the numerator and denominator by 2, in this case, the common denominator of the inner fractions. And if I do that, now be careful here, I'm going to distribute that 2 in, because the first fraction has 2 terms in the numerator, so I've got to be careful to make sure I distribute the 2 in there. And I would have 2 plus, and then 1/2 times 2 is 1, and then 6 times 2 is 12. So that would be 3/12, which would then be 1/4. So two methods. One is you combine the terms in the numerator and denominator and then divide fractions. Or method 2, I can multiply numerator and denominator by the least common denominator of all the inner fractions, and that will eliminate those inner fraction denominators and simplify the complex fraction. Now let's try another one. In this case we'll use a variable. Of course, variables represent numbers, and the procedure here would be pretty much the same. In this case I have a fraction in numerator and denominator, and I'm going to use method number 2 and find the least common denominator of those inner fraction denominators. Now, the inner fractions have one of them has a denominator of t squared and the other t, so my least common denominator there would just be t squared. That would be the value that both the t squared and t would go into evenly. And then I'm going to multiply these fractions. Be careful again, the first fraction has 2 terms in it, both in numerator and denominator. So I've got to make sure I distribute that t squared into both of them. So t squared times 1 over t squared would be 1, and then t squared times 1 would just be t squared. So notice again the t squared has eliminated or taken care of the fraction within the numerator, and then distributing the t squared into the denominator of the first fraction, I'll end up with t squared divided by t, or t, and then minus 1 times t squared, or minus t squared. Now 1 plus t squared doesn't factor, but the denominator, I can take out a t, so I'll have 1 minus t. And that would be 1 plus t squared over t times 1 minus t. And I don't get any cancellation there, so that would be the answer.